to discuss the results of the Global Index on Responsible AI for the Global South. This session that we call Southern Perspectives, the Global Index on Responsible AI, it's possible thanks to the collaboration of all our partners at the D4D network and our collaboration with the Global Center for Responsible AI, who's leading this process. As we all know, the rapid growth and interest in artificial intelligence holds considerable promise for social and economic transformation for countries in the Global South. Ongoing debates highlight the considerable opportunities AI presents for the Global South, but as the use of AI increases, there are also growing concerns around ensuring responsible AI development, particularly to ensure that these new technology systems are designed and implemented in ways that reinforce human rights, ethics, fairness, and equity. Launched in 2024, the Global Index for Responsible AI is the first tool to assess the state of responsible artificial intelligence. The first edition of this index assessed the state of responsible AI in 138 countries, with more than half of those countries in the Global South. Overall, the index found that countries are lagging behind significantly in provisioning safe and ethical frameworks for the development of artificial intelligence across all sectors. By examining key social, technical, and policy dimensions, the index serves to highlight gaps, trends, and opportunities for government stakeholders to advance responsible AI practices and to enhance collaboration around multi-stakeholders. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to my colleagues that are going to join me in this discussion. First, we have Maurice McNaughton. Dr. Maurice holds a PhD in decision sciences at Georgia State University and has over 25 years senior management and leadership experience in the planning and direction of enterprise-level information technology in organizations. He is currently the director of the Center for Innovation at the Mwende School of Business and Management, and Dr. McNaughton is a founding director of the Caribbean Open Data Institute, a regional coalition of Caribbean organizations that engage and works with regional governments, researchers, journalists, technologists, NGOs, and academics to raise awareness, strengthen capacity, and foster collaborations towards the adoption of open development approaches. He's doing active research in the areas of open, big data, digital transformation, and digital capacity. So thanks, Maurice, and welcome. We also have Cecilia Mwende. Cecilia is a data scientist at the Local Development Research Institute, LDRI, and her work is focused on data analysis, natural language processing, computer vision, and research on responsible AI in Africa. She has experience in building and deploying AI and machine learning models, particularly in the context of climate adaptation in smallholder agriculture. Welcome, Cecilia. We also have Merl Chandana. Merl is a team lead of data, algorithms, and policy at the policy team at LIRNeasia, with a strong focus on applying data science and artificial intelligence for positive social impact. He recently led one of two hubs in the Asia-Pacific region, contributing to the first edition of the Global Index on Responsible AI. Merl also served on the Sri Lankan Task Force for the National AI Strategy, where he guided efforts on trust, safety, and responsible AI. Welcome, Merl. We also have Marwan Tarazi. Marwan is the Director of Design and Innovation at the Center for Continuing Education in Birzeit University. His work is focused on the design of development models for transforming the way people learn, work, and interact within the society in a rapidly changing world. He firmly believes that only through innovation and learning paradigms linked to applying a real-world context can the region create a workforce prepared for the future of work and society, able to stand up in the face of the enormous challenges the region is facing. Marwan has dedicated his career to redesign and creating new models that emphasize the true meaning of learning that are based on knowledge creation, skills acquisition, engagement with society, digital transformation, and relevance. He's forward-looking and constantly looking for solutions, typically outside the box for a very challenging development problems facing Palestine and the region. And we have Nicolás Grossman. Nicolás is the project director of the Global Index on Responsible AI at the Global Center on AI Governance. Nicolás led the design of a comprehensive measurement framework for responsible AI and supervised an expansive data collection program in over 148 countries. Nicolás is a sociologist specialized in research and global measurement on data for public good and responsible AI. Prior to joining the center, Nicolás was the research and data lead for the Global Data Barometer and spearheaded the open data and data journalism strategy for Properati, a private sector online real estate platform. He's completing his master's in political sociology at the National University 3 de Febrero, where he focused on studying the challenges of big data and AI in less developed countries. So I'm really happy to have all these people that have led the research in different regions around the world, but mainly that are part of our network and are partners of the Global Center and have coordinated a big group of researchers all over the world to understand how responsible AI is impacting our regions and mainly the world. So I will start with the first question, and I think we can start with you, Maurice. If you can tell us in 3 minutes, what is the state of responsible AI in your region?
Okay, thanks, Gloria. And again, great to be with colleagues again from around the globe and happy to continue to share the findings and insights from the study we did in the Caribbean. So it was not entirely surprising to us that the Caribbean, at least the 9 countries that we did this study for, were found to be quite lagging in terms of established, structured governance frameworks and mechanisms for responsible AI. Most Caribbean countries are at a very nascent stage of focusing on responsible AI, and actually many of the initiatives, the activities, the actions are being driven by non-state actors, universities, and civil society. And while awareness around responsible AI is increasing, as evidenced by popular commentary and articles on the topic, there is relatively scant evidence of concrete action being taken by governments in the region. The outstanding exception, of course, is the Dominican Republic. DOMREP is really the only Caribbean country that has developed and released a national AI strategy, which also includes an operational plan, and it represents a quite excellent exemplar for other governments in the region. And is certainly in keeping with the kind of progressive digital agenda that the DR has had, which we've seen consistently across other studies like the Global Data Barometer and others, so that they have a national innovation policy, they have a national cyber strategy, and they have really situated AI as being integral to digital infrastructure, workforce development, and economic development. So it's a quite excellent exemplar and really by some distance is ahead of the rest of the Caribbean. And we certainly look to that as an exemplar. And in other countries like Jamaica, we see certainly the start of government actions, such as here there's been the establishment of an AI task force, which recently issued a report to Cabinet. That's not yet in the public domain, but at least there's signs of activity. So what I would say, Gloria, and in fact, one of the good things about the comprehensive nature of the GIRA index is that if we had focused solely on finding existence of national frameworks such as legislation, regulation, policies, strategies, and or guidelines, there would have been relatively little or nothing. But the various dimensions of the index allow us to look at actions by non-state actors, actions by the government, and also capacities. And I see all of those as perhaps leading indicators of things to come. So that while, as I said, there's very little evidence of existing frameworks, I think there is some encouraging signs that we're beginning to take this thing serious and doing the necessary activities to put ourselves in a good position to not only take advantage of AI, but also to guard against some of the human-centric risks that are associated with it.
Thanks, Maurice, and I think you bring something super important, and I think something to highlight about this research is the importance of multi-stakeholder collaboration. As you mentioned, it's not just AI national strategies, but the importance of what other sectors are doing around what is and what AI can do, but especially what responsible AI means for our regions and our countries. And it will be the same question. Hi, Cecilia, welcome. And what's the state of responsible AI in your region?
Hi, Gloria. Thank you so much for having me here. And I feel privileged to be part of the discussion about AI and responsible AI in the region. One of the key things that have been shown, especially using the GRI index, is the variability or the unevenness of adoption and also policy making in the region in different sectors of the countries that we looked at. Even though we have countries like Morocco, like Egypt, also Rwanda and Mauritius, who have already established AI policies, and other countries like Kenya, who already are in the process of making their AI policy. We have other countries who are still in the process of trying to figure it out. And this comes also in the time that, this also comes in the time whereby we are having the AU establish their or endorse their continental AI strategy. And I think that is also an important factor in the African continent, because it will serve as a benchmark for the African countries which are trying to establish their own policies. Also, something that is showing up so much also from the Global Data Index is how we've able to manage and international corporations, organizations such as UNESCO, helping some of the African countries in establishing their AI policies, and also organizations such as GIZ in their Fair Forward program that also are helping out in creation and also adoption of responsible AI. We have GIZ helping Kenya in the publishing of artificial AI practitioners guide, which is really an important document that is really helping people who are involved in the creation and adoption of AI or ethical use of it. And also something that is really keen and maybe something that I know will form around the discussion that we are going to be having today is how data protection policies, even though most of the countries have data protection policies, is how thin they are in protecting data subjects. In this case, the people who give out their data or who are using AIs, especially in the complete life cycle of AI. We have so many cases that you've seen so far. And yeah, also we have something that is very different from what Maurice has said. In Africa, in the region that you're looking at, what is missing is the government frameworks. We're having limited or to no much evidence on the government frameworks. So that is also something that maybe as a region we should be working on. Yeah, thank you, Gloria.
Thank you, Cecilia. And I think also that's part of maybe something that we can discuss later in terms of the effectiveness of policies that are already in place and what's going to be their role in terms of securing and guaranteeing responsible AI developments. I think that's also super important. And our next speaker, Merl, it will be also the same question for you. Like, what's the state of AI governance in your region?
Hi, thanks for inviting me. So we cover the Asia Pacific and Oceania region rather, and first thing to say is I think this is pretty standard, but it's really again worth highlighting that like this is a very diverse region, and we I think cuts across more than 10 time zones, if I'm not mistaken. And there's incredible diversity even in terms of performance. You see a few countries who are performing really well at the top, maybe not your like top tier of countries, but like pretty up there. They are doing like you see activity in government frameworks, government action, and even civil society. And then there's a set of countries right at the bottom, couple of countries who are very close to the bottom. So this disparity is really stark. And sometimes it's not even straightforward, like given like the diversity, like translating some of the best practices is not as straightforward as one might think. So the diversity of things is like the first most notable thing. But we also see like a variety of like really interesting examples, because one of the things we as an organization was keen on was like figuring out like how do countries translate some of these principles into action. So we've seen like really like interesting and inspiring work on indigenous data rights, for example, in New Zealand. And we've seen like incredible activity by the civil society in Philippines. I mean, interestingly, Philippines, I think the civil society activity outscored both government action and government frameworks, marking like very high activity around that region. And we see like one of the key like high performance Singapore having a lot of frameworks and processes where they're helping the private sector adopt AI through like software applications, which maps principles into executable software code. Then that gets reflected in some of the products. So it's a variety of like very different actions and inspiring action, I would say. And there's also, I think, like when you take the region as a whole, if you compare it to other regions, one of the things we see is if you especially compare the region to Europe is that like in Europe, you see government framework scoring really high, as one might expect, whereas in our region, you see government action usually being like the highest performing type of activity you see in the region. So there's a lot of activity by government. So it's, I mean, it's difficult to paint it like in a broad brush, but like I think a general reading of it is governments are interested in putting AI to use through policies and guidelines rather than like binding regulations. So those are some of like the main highlights that I see in our region.
Thank you, Merl. And I think it's great that you brought specific examples around actions, because I think they also show a lot of the potential, the interest, and the capacity, you know, that you can see in the Global South. And as you mentioned, it's not only like a top-down approach in terms of what the government is doing, but also it's the people, the organizations, like putting in practice new ideas, a new way of using AI with a responsible human rights perspective. So I think that's also really, really interesting. And last, we have Marwan. I will also ask you, Marwan, the same question in terms like, what's the state of responsible AI in your region? And I know that you have a presentation and it's there. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to present, a morbid state of AI based on the reality we're living in. So basically, we use the global index as provided a good indicator for how to go about looking at the state of AI in the region. And we had some, scores for countries and different ratings. But I think all that doesn't matter much, unfortunately, because when you look at the Global Index for Responsible AI, it looks at, some of the key indicators, something about human rights, accountability, transparency, etc., how AI is used to apply all these things. But a responsible AI requires a responsible social contract in countries. And in the MENA region, there's no responsible social contract. Human rights are not respected. There's no accountability, no transparency, security, no privacy, etc. We live in an authoritarian regime that really dictates all these things. And unfortunately, these are authoritarian regimes suddenly discovered, oh, wow, with all these technologies and all these AI tools, you can do a lot of surveillance and you can really enforce your grip on things. So we have governments who are extremely powerful tools that empower domination and control, and then they have all the requirements, they have access all the data, and then you have citizens that have low technical capabilities, they're low education awareness, you have a weak civil society, and that is getting weaker, and oppressive regimes. So when we talk about, responsible AI in MENA, no, it's not responsible. It's being used in an extremely harmful way. And then suddenly, we go down to, then we go to Gaza, and that's a different story altogether, what's happening. We see Israel weaponizing AI to the teeth, everything that's irresponsible about AI. Every responsible, ethical, legal, humanitarian, human rights, law, anything that's irresponsible about AI, and everything that everybody safeguards against. When you talk about the dystopian reality that could be created by AI, this is being today applied by Israel. And what's really worrying and scaring about this is the direct participation of the global north in this. Some of the US, UK, Germany, those countries are not only, they're complicit. And suddenly this big facade called, called about democracy and human rights and the colonial power dynamics. And, suddenly this facade all broke down. And then when we go down to it, and we look at, the AI and big tech companies that drive the AI highway and the responsible AI highway, like Google, Microsoft, Meta, etc. All those guys are directly, actively, and directly participating in the genocide. They provide data, they provide information, they provide the servers, they provide support to the Israelis to commit that. So these people, those countries are complicit. Countries are complicit. Big power are complicit. Media, industrial complex are complicit. So when we ask about the state of responsible AI in MENA, I think we should ask about the state of responsible AI in America, and we should ask it in Germany, and then UK, and much of the global South. Finally, what we really need to look at as a final message is they have horrific implication on the citizens of the global South. It's not about Palestine. What's happening now, Palestine, just a showcase and telling you what's going to happen in the future. But what is really important for us as a collective to think about is what's happening in the global North is going to happen across the global South. This trend of what's happening in Palestine, just telling what is coming. And just keep in mind that it's not about global South, global North, because governments in the global South, like MENA, they like to be in control. And we know that the global South, there's a lot of appetite for control and power, and they like the use of AI. So I think it's up to us, groups like us, to take responsibility and to take collective action, because what's happening is very serious. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marwan. And I think what you bring to the table, I think, super important, and it's a part of the challenges that we are seeing in terms of inequalities and in terms of protecting human rights. And I will jump to Nicolás. As you design and work on the methodology around the Global Index on Responsible AI, my question for you will be, like, what role does data play in achieving responsible AI? And in terms of the results that you are seeing, what type of data governance is necessary to achieve responsible AI, AI governance and models?
Okay, thank you very much, Gloria, for the organization and for inviting us here to this conversation. Thank you for my colleagues for this very useful summaries of their visions and the challenge that this region is facing. So going directly to the question, Gloria, as we know, the role of data in AI is substantial. We can think, obviously, as we know, it is a key asset for deploying AI system. And we can also think about data about AI systems, taking into account some trends regarding algorithm repositories of the public sector, or even some audits of the private sector deployed AI systems. And when we talk about data about those systems, we talk about accountability and the access to know what kind of system I'm using, in which situations, etc., that this can foster the governance of AI. But let's focus on what we have said of understanding data as a key asset for AI and also for responsible AI. When we think about this, I think we can split the conversation into two main areas that I would like to bring this to the table. We should think about the access to data, and we should think about the relationship between this data and different aspects of responsible AI. So when we talk about the access of data, we talk about good quality, updated, and representative data to be the input of AI systems, and also some conversations and debates that are being around the global conversations regarding sovereignty on data, control, agency, as there is this rush for collecting, analyzing data with AI systems. We have sometimes these tensions between who generates, holds, and have control over data. That might be transnational platforms and other actors like the government that might require that data for public policy and they do not have it, or they might need it in some other ways and they cannot access to it. So I think that thinking and reflecting about access to data is key to these debates on responsible AI. And then I would like to bring also to the table this strong connection between data and different aspects of responsible AI. As my colleagues were mentioning before, we had, for the Global Index on Responsible AI, we had broken down the concept on responsible AI in different thematic areas, and we can see how data is key in many of these. For example, when we talk about the human rights and AI dimension of the Global Index, we see obviously the new challenges that AI brings to data protection and privacy. This combination of personal data, real-time tracking, location, etc., powered by AI tools brings new challenges that we need to consider. Also, when we talk about bias and unfair discrimination, a fair and equitable data set is required. And one other important consideration is the impact of data in cultural and linguistic diversity. One of the findings of the Global Index on Responsible AI is that a lot of Global South countries are failing in addressing this challenge of cultural and linguistic diversity of AI systems, and having the accurate and the required data sets to have local solutions to local challenges is very important. Then if we go to the dimension, for example, of responsible AI governance, the transparency on the data sets is key on the transparency and explainability of AI systems. And also there is a topic that we have also seen not very well addressed in many regions of the world. However, we have seen Asian countries doing well, is regarding safety and security, both of AI systems and data that inform these AI systems. So again, with this propagation of storing and analyzing data, there is more possibility of data breach, etc., that need to be taken very seriously and to protect the data of the people. And lastly, let's say talking about the responsible AI capacities of governments, we need to see more effort towards data literacy, both among the populations and among the public sector skills development of the servants, because this is, we know, a key starting point. Going from data skills to AI skills is like the relevant path to do it. And lastly, when we talk about the type of data governance that is required, we say that we don't have like a fixed way to do it, but we always need to take into account that as there is no unique way, we need to foster international collaboration, improving public participation and awareness. And like a last note, I think it would also be interesting to think about to align the incentives of the different actors towards a good data governance, but always, again, promoting local development for the local needs.
Thanks, Nico. I think I will just highlight two things of what you mentioned. I think it's was super complete, and I think it also gave us the idea of challenges, possibilities, opportunities, but also in terms of how and what data means, right? In the discussion about AI, responsible AI, data is the center of this discussion, and I think it's important to highlight that because at the end, data is power. Who accesses the data, who can control it, who's also who has sovereignty over our data in different parts of the world. And I think it's also a big question for the Global South, how we can manage that better and what are the specific policies, models exactly that we need, infrastructure, no, even infrastructure to handle that data. I think that's super important. Also in terms of data literacy, I think some of our regions come from Latin America, and I also led the research in Latin America. It's that we are lagging behind in terms of data literacy and awareness for the population in terms of what these technologies are able to do, but also what they mean or what they will mean in the future for our daily living. And I will go back to the researchers with one more question before I kind of open the floor and have like a discussion among all of us. And I will go back to Maurice in terms of what are the emerging challenges for AI governance in the Caribbean that you are seeing right now and for the future, Maurice?
Okay, thanks, Gloria. And so one of the key things, and it's something that Nico just mentioned, data governance. So we've had predecessor studies to JIRA, such as the Global Data Barometer, that reflected quite a lot of gaps in the Caribbean in terms of the governance of data, the existence of frameworks, the availability and use of data effectively. And, you know, there's a risk that AI becomes the flavor of the month and people move on without addressing those issues. And so we think it's incredibly important that as we advance the advocacy and the dialogue around AI, we maintain and not lose sight of the importance of those data governance issues. Because if we're not making data representative, then we'll always be consigned to using algorithms and AI solutions from other jurisdictions which are not necessarily relevant to the Caribbean context. And so it's just very important that we keep a line of sight on the data governance issues, even while we, you know, pursue the AI, responsible AI agenda. I think I would say maybe there are three other things that are key for the Caribbean in terms of challenges and things that we have to address and respond to. And the first is really just greater awareness and advocacy. And I think, again, the results of the JIRA study give us that sort of evidence-based ammunition to pursue that kind of dialogue. And I think one of the great outcomes of the Caribbean study is that we have a team of academics and policy activists who are now armed with this information, this evidence to be able to sort of inform their advocacy. And a number of our researchers have been participating in various local and regional dialogues and with government actors, not only making them aware of the findings of the JIRA study, but also advocating for responsible approaches. So awareness and advocacy is important, and we obviously need to, on that platform, begin
to develop this in order to be able.
Sorry, I seem to have been muted a bit.
Just for the last seconds, yep.
Okay, right, and so that's key. Perhaps as important, if not more important for us, is building capacity. Again, if we don't have the capacity within the region to not only use AI and Gen AI in particular, but also to be able to create and build our own indigenous solutions, again, we're going to be constrained to what is handed down from other jurisdictions. So there has to be a big and important emphasis on capacity. Capacity in terms of general literacy, digital literacy, AI literacy across the board, capacity in terms of building the specialists, the data scientists who can begin to build those Caribbean indigenous solutions, and capacity in terms of the public sector, and just, again, awareness and understanding of responsible AI and what that means. I think the third thing that I would say is key, Gloria, is just adopting and pursuing regional approaches to the AI agenda. I think one of the challenges we've had in the Caribbean is this, different countries fiercely guard national sovereignty. But many of our countries are just much too small and do not have the resource base or the capacity to pursue an independent AI agenda. And we just have to look at regional approaches. We have to leverage international agencies. Like UNESCO has been quite visible and doing a lot of work in the Caribbean in helping to establish benchmarks and policy approaches. And we have to take regional approaches to AI governance. It can't be every individual country doing their own thing. As we say, it's quite important for this agenda that we perhaps relax a little bit or set aside the conventional primacy of national sovereignty in favor of collaborative and regional approaches to AI and one that is human-centered. So Gloria, those are the critical things that I think, the challenges that we have to confront and the approaches that we have to take if we're going to ensure that AI becomes a partner to the Caribbean in terms of the opportunity and the good that can come of it, and if we can navigate through the risks and the challenges, some of which Marwan so eloquently articulated, then we have to take care of those issues.
Thank you, Maurice. I think, yeah, data governance and capacity, and also in terms of like adapting these to local context, and especially for the global south, as you mentioned, how we can manage and how we can enhance collaboration. That is also important, not just like going everyone by themselves. And I think tools as the URI help us to put like a common denominator in terms of what can we achieve together, where can we direct our efforts in terms of sharing knowledge, experiences, processes, etc. So I think that's also super important. And I will go, Cecilia, also in terms of the challenges. What are the challenges that you are seeing in Africa in terms of AI governance, based on the results of the URI, but also in terms of the future and the current context?
Thank you, Gloria. I think one of the main challenge we are seeing is how most of the laws are lacking or are insufficient to help in the societal challenges introduced by AI. One of the top is the data protection policies that I mentioned previously. And in as much as so many countries in Africa are adapting and also leveraging the AI systems in solving their challenges or getting solution for their challenges that they have in their countries, is that most these AIs are left without being looked at. And therefore, we have challenges like in Kenya, there's an issue with WorldCoin sometime early in this year, whereby they were collecting biometric data. And in as much as the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner in Kenya stopped them, they were still collecting data, and they had already collected data, and they were paying the people who they were collecting data from around $46. So you can imagine getting biometric data, which is really sensitive. And even with the development of AI and how the region is, and how it's going to grow even in future, that a company already has a biometric data for subject individuals. Also, we have concerns about surveillance, whereby some countries in the south have been complaining about their government actually deploying surveillance technologies to control and discipline and law-abiding citizens. So such a cases will just leave countries being in a state of fear, because if now the government is, we are not regulating these tools that we are going to be using, we're just deploying them to even the citizens. So it is going to cause the power balance between the citizens and also the government. Also, we have also the labor laws. With the development of AI, it is clear that we need to change also how this labor law looks like, because most of the countries in Africa, their labor laws are still ancient, so they don't have a coverage or a clause that covers AI or digital platforms. Also, I'll give an example with what happened in Kenya, where moderators were used to train the OpenAI's ChatGPT and paid $2 for the training. There's also a YouTube channel known as 60 that did that. That covered that interview with the moderators, citing how adversely they've been affected, because these moderators are actually looking at very graphical images of children abuse, rape, suicide, and they were not given sufficient they were not sufficiently compensated even after they trained those models. So in such a way, we are saying that with this development, you also need to look at how our laws look like. Are they able or are they sufficient enough to cover all the citizens from the deployment of these AIs to also from the inception to also the deployment of this AI? And also something at the key of my heart also is the children's rights. Children are the most vulnerable in the society, and they are being exposed to various technologies with those small tablets that they own. So it is the work of the stakeholders, the parents, and also the government to ensure that these kids are safe online and that their rights are being protected. So those are some of the challenges that I see arising when it comes to the growth and how it is the growth of AI and how it is being adopted and accelerated in the continent.
Thanks, Cecilia. And I think some of the things that you mentioned, I think maybe are not just for Africa, but I think for all the global South, I think we can find also like common entry points around those that you mentioned, also in terms of inequalities and who's capitalizing the data from citizens in the global South. And I think that's also a discussion super relevant for the future. And in terms also for our children, like all over the world, how they're going to handle and how they're being protected in front of these old technologies, etc. And now I will jump to Merl in terms of what are the challenges that you are seeing in the Asia Pacific.
Yeah, I can echo most, if not all, of the sentiments that have been echoed by others, and I'll get to some of that later. But one thing I've been seeing is around state capacity, or both in terms of adopting AI, but also in terms of governing AI. When it comes to adopting AI, I think like most governments, most state actors are really keen on using AI, whether it's for PR purposes or whether it's to actually like offload some of the more mundane work that we do. There's a lot of interest, but I don't think the governments have like a clear sense of what's truly possible and what's not possible with AI. You see a lot of like unsolicited projects being approached. Whenever something has an AI label, you often see like everybody being enamored and being like and being carried away, and having like, and what the index captures is around public procurement. I don't think public procurement has been like a prominent conversation in parts of the world, while there is a lot of state interest. And that, I think, given the state interest in AI, in using AI, I think public procurement becomes like a important conversation to have. That's on the AI use side. But even in terms of like governance of AI, I think like state capacity is very much needed, as been previously described specifically even by Nicolás. So there are like interesting and very grave implications on existing data protection paradigms and principles of existing laws, and that intersect with AI. And I don't think most of these implications and nuances are well captured. And we don't know whether those nuances are even like properly understood and appreciated, like even by existing bodies and authorities. So state capacity around like both strengthening existing regulations and also thinking about new risk in governance is super important. That's one piece, and the others are mostly what others have been like echoing, but I'll add maybe like a specific flavor that I see. I see like the issue around awareness is almost a twin problem. I think on one hand, there's definitely lack of awareness like across the spectrum. Like when you speak to private sector companies, you'll see like often responsible AI is seen as like hindrance to innovation or hindrance to whatever they want to do with AI, as opposed to being like a way to actually responsibly innovate and build trust of the AI systems with their customers. So having responsible AI capacity and awareness like across like organizations, not just like lawyers and governance teams, becomes key, because responsible AI cannot be thought in isolation as like a compliance job. You need to think it more broadly. And there's also, I think, when it comes to the general public and even in other actors, as much as we say like responsible AI needs more awareness, I think there's also confusion around like many different terms and like new different kinds of indexes cropping up on a daily basis. At least in my conversation I've seen. So we've heard ethical AI, we've heard trustworthy AI, now it's responsible AI. What do you mean? What's the difference? So like having like thinking about how do you communicate, especially even like even among this group and similar stakeholders, I think is important, because like it can be overwhelming. Like AI itself, I think there's confusion and sometimes even fear. But like being really sympathetic to all the stakeholders and being able to properly communicate becomes key as we try to bridge this gap of lack of awareness. And I could only echo and don't have a lot of first-hand experience, but like AI being used for nefarious applications by state and other actors. I mean, we see across the board, it carries a different label. Sometimes it's public safety, sometimes it's state security. All of that carries seemingly like noble goals, but it's sometimes like really questionable what's going on underneath. And you rarely see like, especially when it's labeled as public security or public safety, like any introspection on like how it infringing on people's rights. So those are like some of the challenges that I see.
Thank you, Merl. I think they complement perfectly the previous points that were mentioned, and also in terms of thinking about a state capacity. And I really like that you brought the idea and the topic about public procurement, because yeah, for the governance, and I think there's a lot of experience all over the world in terms of public procurement processes, or making them more accountable in terms of open data, open government, and how we can connect all that knowledge also for these new technologies and new contexts, but also with the previous structures and collaboration models that we have, especially for public procurement. I think that's also a very interesting road to explore. And now I will jump to Marwan, and I think Marwan, you already mentioned some of the challenges and of the issues of these new technologies in MENA, and not just MENA, but for the world. But in terms of elaborating a little bit more, or what are the emerging challenges that you're seeing in MENA around AI governance and around responsible AI?
I think the problems and the challenges are, they're reflected by everyone. And I think what we need to think about at this stage is how can we, the challenge ahead of us all is enormous. We are up against something that is a huge monster, in my opinion. I mean, we can see it. We see it now. We see it with for example, the social media networks. I mean, we were looking at how the social media networks, for example, Meta and others, were dealing with the censorship. They were dealing with shadow banning. They decided how they want to do things their own way, what is allowed to go, what is not allowed to go. And that has serious, very serious implications on the lives of people. We see it with Google, we see it with all these big tech companies. And then if one country goes alone, if we act independently, we cannot stand up to those guys. Those guys have become super monsters. I mean, they are, or super organizations that are just monopolies, and they're like bigger than many governments. So, and again, the issues about awareness raising, the issues about education, these are cross-cutting themes, and it's going to be difficult for each country independently to work on those. There are many lessons to be learned. Somebody developing something in some region is something that we can learn from. My message, what I hope we need to work on, we can work on to make a difference, is to come up with a collaborative framework through a group like this one, where we can work together, where we can sit and develop things together and have collective action as Global South actors, and rather than working independently. You know, the resources are scarce, and I know everybody here gets a little bit of funding to do a bit of training here, and a bit of awareness raising here, and a bit of public media there, and then you get a limited funding to do something for a limited period of time, and then the funding ends, and then everybody kisses and says goodbye, and then salam alaikum, as we say in Arabic, and everybody goes each their way. What needs to be done is we need to do something collectively. So whatever we start, we have big program and agenda we want to make an impact on the social media platform, on the different media platform. We work together collectively to try to get some issues about privacy, about our data, about data governance, about the use of the data. We cannot, we need to work collectively on that. That would become a collective action. We develop a training. When everybody talks about education and about AI and educating with AI, there's something very important to take into consideration now, is that today you really don't need too much technical information to get to use this AI thing, to do a lot with it. I mean, with generative AI and all these things, there's so many tools that you can do so much with without having a strong technical expertise. So, this kind of education where you frame things, where you empower AI for development, where you can get people to learn how to use the tools effectively for development, is an important factor that everybody's sort of shying away from. Thinks that AI is a big thing. We need to get into data, engineering and data science. And of course, you need those people. You need those people to support the development and support you to understand, to come up. But on the other hand, there's so much that this new monster, or whatever it is called, AI, can do in terms of development, supporting people, that this is an area that we can help people navigate through and use it, the AI for good. I mean, the AI for good is something that can be capitalized on quickly. And so these are areas that we should work on. Again, I call for, we are working on it individually. I know Maurice is working on this individually, etc. So what I'm saying, let's work, come up with, through this group, on a framework for collective action from the Global South, because we need to do it, and because we're up against something really scary in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Marwan. And I think, in terms of thinking maybe out of the box and thinking about the possibilities, also know that these new technologies bring to reinforce and to have more collective action. And I think that's also super important. And I think something that we can, as Global South organizations, something that we should aim and maybe look forward to, like in terms of how we can improve or strengthen collective action in this topic. And Nico, I have a question for you, and also I will make that question. And I think if after Nicolás participation, if also the rest of the group want to add something, the rest of the research hub directors, because this question is quite general, but I think also highlights maybe the possibilities around the index and the possibilities in terms of having data that can fit or that can help us in our work and our campaigns and our programs in terms of having this information all together and having this global comparison in something that a year ago was super new, and maybe I think it was the first tool to measure responsible AI. Now I think, as Merl mentioned, there are other indexes measuring different things around AI implementation, programs, policies, etc. But I think also the global index as a pioneer tool. Nico, my question will be, how can the results of the global index on responsible AI be translated into policy recommendations or best practices for governments, businesses, or other organizations working in specific regions around the world?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I would say that not only the results can be used to inform policy, I think that all the conceptual framework that we have developed, and we have also validated this conceptual framework toward responsible AI with a wide range of stakeholders in the Global South. So having this benchmark and this breakdown, these definitions of both what is expectable for improving responsible AI and also activities that work as a process going there, not only reaching the final governance, let's say. I think that all this agreement, obviously, that we built on top of worldwide recognized agreements like UNESCO recommendation, OECD principle, etc. But the way it was breaking down, it was explained, and it was made a consensus with a global community, I think that's a good starting point for policymakers. But obviously then we have the results, which I think are very interesting to contextualize and to learn from other countries. Let's say to see what countries from in different situations could be in the similar region, but perhaps in different regions, but with similar context, what they are doing. So I think that we can use both. We can use what we call the scores, the numbers, to see where is each country or region in a thematic area, in a dimension, or in a pillar, to track and to see where are the gaps. But also to identify where we can learn from. And on top of that, we have, as you know, we have published all the evidence as open data, and also you can access in the thematic areas landing page of our website. You can see all the evidence that was assessed for each thematic area. For example, if policymakers are working and they want to improve the policy towards AI and gender equality, they can go to the landing page on gender equality. They can find the definitions and all the frameworks and all the government actions and all the inputs of the non-state actors in that topic, very important for responsible AI, and improve their capacities to inform that policy. So I think that to summarize to your question, I think there are multiple ways it can inform with the different resources that the index provides. But as we like to say, we think about the index as the starting the conversation. There are not all the answers there, but you can identify key points and you can identify very valuable resources to create policy at the local level or even regional. As we have seen, the Global Index report is currently informing some regional debates on responsible AI.
Super. Thank you, Nico. Now I will give the mic to Merl also.
I almost want to validate what Nicolás said through a specific example that I've been fortunate to be a part of in Sri Lanka. So our organization was invited to be a part of the National AI Strategy Formulation Committee, and there was not a lot of emphasis at the beginning around responsible AI. What the index allowed us to do is, one, it provided us credibility as being immersed in the research, but it provided a conceptual framework where we weave the concepts of trustworthy and responsible AI into the national AI strategy, and some of that language is already like reflected. So it's like almost a direct path to policy influence. And there's now more interest now that like it's in a document, and I've been having discussions on now there's interest in the country performing well on various indices or indexes, and responsible AI is one of the conversations that we are having. So like countries, so index, what naturally an index would do is people then want to be competitive and make sure like they perform well, at least on certain indicators. So like both the indicators and performing well on the indicators, hopefully that will lead to meaningful change. Sometimes there's a tendency that indicators, people do window dressing around indicators without meaningful change happening. But as long as like proper changes happen on the ground with respect to like the index score, I think it's super useful. So just adding like a specific flavor to Nicolás's 2 points. Yeah.
Thank you, Merl. Maurice?
Yeah, just to comment briefly on that. We found the outputs of JIRA to be, as Nico said, much more than a set of rankings. It's a very rich repository of evidence and a set of reference documents that we've already started using as part of our discussions and our dialogue around advocacy. So, one can reference benchmarks to good practices, or one can reference non-state actor activities that are taking place in the region. And I find that open data set very rich. So I would encourage everyone to just pull it down and use it as a kind of reference. The one other thing I would say, Gloria, and this is not so much the benefits of the artifact itself, but the benefits of the process. And so one of the collateral benefits for us here in the region is that through the JIRA study, we've built a community of AI advocates in the region, academics, policy advocates. I mean, our team of researchers that did the 9 countries is quite eclectic, and includes anthropologists, people with a legal orientation, data scientists, and they have each within their own sort of domains already been part of the dialogue, AI dialogue in their own countries or in regional dialogue. And that's a very impactful outcome of the process, of the JIRA process. And certainly something that we look to leverage and build on as we go forward. Certainly for JIRA 2.0, whenever it happens, Nico. But yeah, I think the ability to build that community of researchers, which again, in our case is, I'm actually quite proud of the researcher community that we have as a result of JIRA. I think that is one of the very positive outcomes of this study that we certainly can leverage going forward and have been leveraging going forward.
Thank you, Maurice. And I totally agree with you in terms of like developing this network of collaboration, but also this network of human labor. And I think it's also that I would like to highlight the huge amount of human labor that's behind this tool. I think it's amazing to see the index, to go into the website, to have all the data available for anyone who wants to use it, as you mentioned, as Nico mentioned, but also in terms of the work that has been done to get all that info there. I think that process is super valuable. And also that shows the capacities, the willingness, and also all the knowledge that we have in our regions. And when we work together, we can achieve, I think, amazing things. And to have this network and to have you all in this conversation representing different regions of the Global South, like identifying what are the common points that we have and the possibilities in terms of like working together, influencing the global agenda, but also in terms of like bringing our local context to the global conversation. I think that's also super relevant. And it's kind of a result of this process or other processes that are sometimes measure and gather data, like the Global Data Barometer, for example. But at the end, also these processes are about people. And data, it's about people, and data represents the conditions and people and communities. So I think that's also very important, and it's very important not to forget that. And my question also will be an open question for all our speakers, and it's about what strategies can we implement to promote more collaboration between Global South countries and international organizations to improve responsible AI practices. And I don't know who would like to start. We can change the order. So I don't know who wants to start with this one.
I can give it a go, but it's again, I mean, I've been told that's what I've been talking about all across. I think there is appetite with the international organizations for collaboration, for big collaborations and programs that span across multiple networks. So I think this is the starting point, is that we should get together and work together as, as partners, and think of projects, collective projects, come up with concept notes on specific areas, and then start reaching out to potential international partners. But we have to have ideas that make sense, that we develop collectively, and then use them as sort of seed for funding. That's, to me, that would be the most practical way of going about it.
Yeah, if I might comment just very quickly, Gloria. I mean, I think the JIRA, in terms of the index and the process, already provides a great medium for that North-South collaboration, because it brings together all of these practices and references, so that, we can see where the top 10 countries are, and we can see where in the Caribbean we're in about the third quartile from the bottom, but we can see where they are, right? And that in and of itself is a way of bridging the gap between the various countries. And then obviously forums just like this, again, is an important part of that collaboration, because just glancing across at your audience on this webinar, there's very good representation from both the Global South and the North as well. So I think these are already important ways in which the JIRA study, the JIRA process, the JIRA idea promotes collaboration between South-South, and particularly, I think sort of one of the key insights from this study was the role that international organizations are playing. And we certainly have seen already in the Caribbean entities like UNESCO playing a very active role in helping to establish benchmarks and facilitate sort of a regional perspective on Caribbean AI policy. So I think those are all good indicators of the ongoing collaboration. One of the things I would say that is important is that we not think of this sort of global collaboration, global governance. We don't confound global governance with unified governance. So while global standards and benchmarks are important and are being established, each country and each region still has to adapt those to their context and their circumstances. And so it's important that we not look at, while we look at global approaches, we not sort of fall prey to a one-size-fits-all. We experienced some of that in sort of predecessor artifacts such as GDPR, and some of the adaptations in our region have become unduly burdensome. And so we have to be very careful to ensure that while we observe and adopt these sort of global frameworks, that there's adequate adaptation to make sense for our own regional and local contexts.
Thank you, Maurice. Merl, please.
Yeah, one thing we've found useful is to engage with a diversity of stakeholders, like in collaboration, not across countries, but even within countries, because sometimes, like, if we isolate ourselves as like responsible AI researchers and not become a part of like the broader conversation, sometimes it can feel like really lonely, and our voices may not be heard. But just collaborating with like actual practitioners of AI, policymakers around like national AI strategies, where like the broader conversation around AI is happening, and trying to almost mold our way into those conversations, and trying to make an influence and make our voices heard in different venues and settings, so that one, it creates like broad awareness, but also we make sure that our voices are heard in all the places that are necessary, so that like even in future, when we increase our visibility like in the right places, when conversations come up, we'll be seeing as like important partners that they want to bring in. So like just thinking through like all stakeholders and especially in the respective local ecosystems and being part of those conversations, I think is really important.
Thank you.
Gloria, sorry, I can go next. Yeah, I think one of the key things that has happened with the Global Data Index is providing a diagnostic tool for us as a region, whereby we are able to see how varied the whole spectrum of AI adoption is. And also, I think the main thing is also looking at each country and their own, because for each country, they have their own challenges. And even with the regional corporations, they can be able to help each other in the development of ethical AIs and establishing those coordinated efforts within the region. Also, I'll say something that has already been said by most of the speakers here is what is international cooperations and the South-South collaboration that is happening. I think as a region, looking at even the evidence and from the research and what was cited as evidence is that you can see this, in as much as we are not there yet as a region, but there is those small steps as we try to figure out this technology. We are having like a case of southern countries whereby they have the SAFRAI and it gave development of the Windhoek statement that recommended action on AI governance, capacity building, infrastructure, research and development, and other sectors that are meant to develop responsible AI. Also, we have a regional discussion around Afrocentric AIs, whereby we are talking about now creating these responsible AIs that have what is called as an African touch, where it is able to reflect the cultural and ethical principles of Africa. And also from what we saw with the appointment of most of the African to form advisory body of the UN, is something that I think it's really important for us, whereby we are part of the discussion and also part of the development of these important principles that are aimed at developing a responsible AI that governs the whole entire continent.
Thank you, Cecilia. And I don't know, Nico, if you would like to add something to this question.
Yes, regarding the global governance, I would like also to reinforce and to agree with other colleagues have mentioned. I think the key starting point is diagnosis. The diagnosis taking into account the particularities of the requirements from the Global South. And I agree that we need to take into account, obviously, local requirements and needs, but I think that most of the Global South countries share a lot of structural conditions that are similar, that makes us face a similar challenge, even though each of us with each of our countries with the local particularities, obviously, but this common ground, I think it should be like recognizing this common ground. This should be the first steps toward this more global collaboration from all the Global South to address these challenges, obviously interacting with these more wider frameworks and initiatives.
Thank you, Nico. And I will open the floor to one question because we have like 8 minutes left. But if someone from the audience, they have been like writing some comments and in the chat, but if you have like any specific question, this is like your chance to make that question. And also I will invite everyone to go to the index website to navigate through the data, to see the results, but also to understand how those results were achieved and what is the data that it was used. And also will invite you to our resource center. The Data for Development network has a massive resource center where you can find papers, case studies, documentation about these topics, and all and many other researchers that have been working with us and these organizations that are part of the discussion. And there are a lot of resources there also for your discussion. And if you have any questions, please contact us. I know that Fiona already put all the links here in the chat. And I think if you don't have any question from the audience, I will just conclude our discussion, and I will highlight some points in terms of the importance of what other sectors beside the government is doing in the Global South in terms of academia, civil society organizations, even local organizations working on new models around AI use, and also putting in the agenda in terms of what AI can bring to the human rights discussion with specific examples, specific programs. And I think that is something to highlight in our regions. Also, in terms of talking about common denominators and having a common ground, I think we are all agree in terms of the importance of local context. I think regional context, local context matter, but also I think it's super useful to have a baseline in terms of how we can measure and what responsible AI means for the global discussion, and also to put in the same place all what's happening in the northern countries with what's happening in the global south, to have a tool where we can see these comparisons, but also these opportunities to strengthen certain agendas. And I think that's also very something that you highlighted in the discussion. Access to data, also in terms of using the URI as a tool, not only as a result, but also using this index as a tool for prompting conversations, for advocacy, for campaigns, for awareness. I think that also it's super important. And in terms of the challenges, I think we all agree that we share a lot of the challenges in terms of data governance, not also in terms of frameworks, but also infrastructure, capacity to work on digital literacy, and also that there are insufficient laws and policies in our regions to handle what's coming, and the need to strengthen state capacity and to work closely with our governments to understand and to improve how they're adopting AI, but also how they're governing AI. And the private sector's role also, right? Like in terms of collective action, in terms of guaranteeing our rights and the respect for our data and how transparent they can be in terms of how they are using the data of our communities. And I think, and I will also highlight and thank this amazing network of responsible AI advocates all over the world in our regions, in the Global South, but also I know that all the organizations that are part of this conversation and are working in this tool and that are part of D4D are convinced that there's another way of doing things. There's another way of guaranteeing that these new technologies really represent an opportunity for development, for enhancing all the strengths and all the possibilities in a positive way for our regions, and also the willingness to collaborate and to work together towards that future that can be achieved if we kind of monitor and understand what these new technologies represent. And if we kind of start thinking more about not just the risk, but also the possibilities, and in terms of having an inclusive participatory discussion around AI development in the Global South, but also all over the world. So I thank everyone for joining us today in this discussion. I really thank our speakers here today and all the work that the URI has meant for all D4D and for all this network. And we are also very, very excited and willing to work together in the future and to continue strengthening our collaboration and the voices of the Global South in these important and crucial discussions for the future of our societies. So thanks everyone. And so this will be available on our networks, and please keep in touch. Here are all the links, our social media accounts, etc. And I'm sure also all the organizations will be really happy to hear from you. If you have any specific questions about regions, example, local examples, etc. So thanks everyone. Have a really nice day or night.